Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to the 5th edition of variously called Two Takes on 10 Records, or Let's Talk About Vinyl Records. And I'm joined once again by Jonas Samuelsson from Sublime Media in Sweden. Hey, Jonas.
Hello, hello.
And we are again going to go through 10 records. As we have done recently, each of us has previously picked 4 records that each of us share, so a total of 8 records. And then just to add a little bit of sizzle, a little bit of spice, there is one surprise record that each of us are going to spring on the other. In fact, I have to confess that I didn't quite check to make sure you didn't have my surprise record, so it may not be that surprising, but we'll find out.
Yeah.
And we also have an added little bonus in today's episode, and maybe Jonas, you want to explain what our little bonus segment is going to be.
Yeah, we talked about sort of records that we think isn't that expensive, but so good that should be in every sort of collector's collection. So we are showing what we call cheap heat records, 5 each, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, or something like that. I was a little more ritzy. I looked for anything I could find on Discogs in pretty good volume for under $10, excluding shipping, but it was pretty good, probably indicator of what they would cost if you found them in the local bins. So
under, I did the same. I did under $10, I think, for each record. Then again, the sort of the record market right now is just crazy. So if it costs 15 or 20, don't get surprised with my record at least. But yeah, try to hold to stay under 10.
Right on. Okay, well then let's get going. And Jonas, I think
great.
Starting with your first record.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to start, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about We Get Requests. This one, classic jazz record with the Oscar Peterson trio.
It's very nice and shiny. It's shiny too.
1964 on Verve Records. Great album cover there. Really captures sort of the essence of the trio, I think. And my favorite song on here is definitely You Look Good to Me, which I use to test my stereo equipment. And this is a pretty bad German 70s press, I think, but it sounds fantastic. So one of my favorite jazz records, period. What's your take on this, Allan?
I was just checking to see which mine was. I think I think I have an American First Press. I think this is a terrific record. Oscar Peterson, of course, is like Joni Mitchell and a few other artists, is a real point of national pride here in this country. And this is an interesting record. He somewhat divides critical opinion, because first of all, he's incredibly prolific. He's got a virtuoso style, which some people criticize him for being, it was sort of too much virtuoso stuff, maybe not quite enough feeling kind of thing. He's just churning this stuff out and sort of, okay, it's another Oscar Peterson record. But this one's a bit different. Oh, I also, my copy, I have some guy called Samuel J. Talbot used to own this, and he's one of these guys who has his, puts his return of address stickers on his record. So I always kind of love that, because then you get a bit of a sense of the provenance of the record before. I think it's an interesting record because, of course, it's all standards. It's, as was very typical of his records, always a lot of standards. It's, as you say, beautifully recorded. And actually, my favorite part about Oscar Peterson's trio is actually not Oscar Peterson, it's actually Ray Brown.
Yeah, me too. I was just going to say that. That's awesome that you said that.
Again, you're right, because when you play it, I mean, I was listening to it again in preparation for this video and thinking, boy, this is recorded so nicely. I can just pick out all the instruments, and Ray Brown is nice and high in the mix. Thigpen is great on drums too, and Oscar Peterson is obviously excellent. But I'm really finding myself listening to Ray Brown. What did you think of the bossa nova covers, the two of them on here?
I think they're pretty good. Maybe it's because it's covers, I don't know. But you're the bossa expert here, so I'll let you decide if it's good.
I mean, if you just approach them, I think, as jazz songs, they're good. But I would say they're the two most un-Brazilian bossa nova covers that you're ever going to hear, right? Because they got this sort of swinging, sort of jazzy, kind of boppish kind of beat, and also Peterson plays like 4 million notes. He's like Mozart, too many notes, right? And like when you're listening to a song like Corcovado, right, which is a very languid, lilting kind of a song, and then it's not a song you're playing 30-second notes in, right? But
No.
Peterson's just like
Yeah,
ripping way through the song.
And
Yeah.
there's a live, I can recommend a live YouTube clip with Oscar Peterson Trio, but they replace Ray Brown with Henning Øystein Peterson, you know, the Danish bass player.
Wonderful player.
Yeah, he was a wonderful player, yeah, but he recorded so much, so it's hard to really swim in his sort of pond because there's so much content. But the clip is from beginning of the 70s, I think, or something like that. And Oscar Peterson, he plays his heart out, and then it's Henning Øystein Peterson come in, and he plays so good, so you can see that Oscar Peterson is smiling at him, and then he goes in to play a solo again, Oscar Peterson, and plays even better because he wanted to sort of match Peterson. I mean, so
there were few people as technically gifted as Peterson. I think either his fans and his critics both would agree, you know, like very few people could approach his level.
So, and I think that he has his own voice also. I mean, the bass, in my opinion, it's not easy to get your own voice with the bass, but you can definitely hear when he's on the session.
Yeah. Anyway, so I think we both recommend getting that record. It's a really lovely record. And if you're thinking, I'd like to put a record on, I'm having a party, whatever, it's that kind of a record, right? That fits very neatly in the in that sort of dinner party environment. Not to belittle it, but it was great in that. Okay, so I guess now we're on to the next record, eh? So I'll talk about this record by Big Star, the short-lived and somewhat tragic American group, which had a couple of great records from the early to mid 1970s. This one, of course, their debut, which is called #1 Record, and their follow-up, Radio City. And I say tragic because these guys were an incredibly talented band. Between Chris Bell and Alex Chilton, the two main vocalists, you have two of the most talented rock musicians of the mid 70s, for sure, without a doubt. And they also, I mean, they've been honing a kind of Beatlesy sound, and they produce these tremendous records, which in retrospect, if you read any review of these records, it's like they praise them right just to the moon for good reason, because this is an absolutely superb album. But their label couldn't or wouldn't distribute them, and then, which was Stax Records, and then Stax, because they couldn't distribute it properly, because they only distributed 10,000 copies of this record, right? Which in rock and roll terms in the 70s is nothing. And those sell out, but radio stations are saying this is great, and there were no copies available, right? And then they cut a deal with Columbia to distribute, but Columbia didn't want to work with the local distributors that Stax had, so they still wouldn't, and the next record also had the same problems. So here were these guys who were getting like rave reviews and selling no records, and they were incredibly frustrated. And and then it all kind of winds up, and Chris Bell obviously dies very soon afterwards in a car crash. It's been said almost every song could be a single off of this record. So many great hooks. The dynamics on here are incredible. Two very distinct but very good singers who really alternate all the way through the track. You've got Chris Bell's got almost like a trumpety brass tone to his voice, and Chilton's a little more intimate Beatles influence. You think forward to like Tom Petty or REM. These are groups and singers and bands that must have heard this record. For me, this is like it's like The Sweet meets REM, right? If you took those two bands and mixed them together, it's kind of so. I mean, I'm not going to go through blow by blow through all the songs. There are a lot of great songs, but I would say, frankly, it's one of those records where you just kind of immerse yourself in the record. I don't find myself focusing on, well, there's the one hit. It really is all the way through, both sides. Just a really interesting and beautifully written and produced slice of mid 70s rock and roll. Not too heavy, but not too light. It's just kind of perfect in a lot of ways. What do you think of it?
Yeah, it's a masterpiece, in my opinion. And Big Star has always been one of those bands that I think that I have exclusivity. Is that the word for it? Like, I'm the only one who know about them. So they feel like I don't want to recommend Big Star because I want them for myself, if you know what I mean. When it comes to buddies and stuff like that. Now, everyone knows about Big Star, but to me they feel like these intimate unknown guys that just like put out this masterpiece of record. And actually when I listened to it now this week, I tried to guess for each song which of Chilton or Bell was the writer of the song, and I got it wrong every time, because I have Chris Bell's record I Am the Cosmos, which I think is equally as good as this one, if
Really?
not even better, but that's maybe another discussion. And his songwriting there is so damn good. So the songs on this one that I thought reminded me more of I Am the Cosmos was actually written by
Chilton?
Hilton, yeah. So it made no sense really, both lyrically and also music wise. So I thought that was kind of neat. So yeah, highly recommended. If you haven't heard Big Star.
Yeah, and it's also some of the tracks on here, particularly side 2, feel like songs that not only could have been outtakes from All Things Must Pass by George Harrison, they could actually have improved that record, right? You know, like
yeah, that's true.
There's a very George Harrison-y feel to some of the. Anyway, as you say, an excellent record.
Yeah.
All right, next up. So the next record we're going to do is this record by Fleetwood Mac, but this is not your mother-in-law's Fleetwood Mac. This is a different, earlier version of Fleetwood Mac. Then Play On. This is the very last record. I think this came out in 69 or maybe 70, somewhere in that winter. I mean, this is the very last record that Peter Green appears on for Fleetwood Mac. Peter Green, of course, was not only really, well, certainly co-founder, but the main sort of driving creative force behind Fleetwood Mac through the first 3 or 4 years of its existence. He, of course, had come out of John Mayall's Blues Breakers. He was basically, I mean, with due respect to other people who are more famous, some people feel the best British blues guitarist of the late 1960s. And, or at least he's mentioned in that kind of company like Eric Clapton and other people like that. And so it's electric Chicago blues, but the first 2 records were. This is a little different. It is still electric blues, but they've added another musician, importantly, a guy called Danny Kirwan, because Peter Green, who had a lot of pressures on his life, and he was slowly descending into what eventually would be full-on mental illness and schizophrenia, probably abetted by the fact he was doing a lot of acid at the time. I mean, he really is one of the classic acid casualties of the 1960s. And he is finding the pressure of being the lead singer, the lead songwriter, the lead soloist, all this stuff. Because even though the band's called Fleetwood Mac and John McVie and Mick Fleetwood are in the band, it's really Peter Green's band. This is really the Peter Green band, and they're not contributing anything like as much creatively as he is. So they bring Danny Kirwan into the band, and he was another guy in the blues scene. Apparently the main impetus for that was for somebody else to play solos and write songs, so that Green didn't have the whole burden on him all the way through the studio time and the concerts and so on. Shortly after this, Green takes too much acid at a commune in Germany and just never really comes back to the band. And that's, I mean, he has a solo career with some good stuff, but he's never really quite the same. But this is, I think, really a pretty masterful record. If you like just the pure electric blues, you're probably better off with their first 2 records. But this one is interesting because, and I'm interested to hear what you think about it, because for me, it has a lot more psychedelia influence in it. There are a number of tracks that are not quite Doorsy. There's that one track, Underway, by Green, which is so Hendrixy, right? It could be just lifted directly off Are You Experienced or Axis, right? Just in the production. I mean, clearly, I think he's feeding off what Hendrix was doing. And the other thing to mention too is, I've got, what version do you have? Do you have the UK or the US version?
I have the German press, but I think that's the UK version because I have a well on it.
So okay, so you have OL on it, like the long version at the end of side 1.
Yeah, 8 minutes long.
Yeah. So how many tracks you could have? The 11 track listing, or?
Yep, 11.
Yeah. Okay, so we basically have the same version, and so that track is, you can see why. Because the Danny Kirwan songs, I think in general, his compositions aren't as good as Peter Green compositions. And so it's no great loss really to lose 2 of his tracks, I think, for that one. But when I listen to the riff on that track, I think a couple things. First of all, the Young Brothers definitely had heard that song when they wrote
Yeah.
"Beating from the Bush," right on Highway to Hell. And now, do you know a guitarist called Colin James, Canadian guitarist? Have you heard of him?
No, no.
Anyway, he well, obviously he's popular here, and he's a bit of a throwback, kind of a Stevie Ray Vaughan kind of guy. At least he was in the early part of his career. But he has his big hit was a track called "Voodoo Thing,"
Okay.
and that riff also shows up on that track as well. So there's a couple of well-known songs that owe their existence, I think, to "Oh Well" by Peter Green, which is such a cool track because it's got that, it's sort of like a 2-act play. It's got this really banging bluesy beginning and then this sort of trippy long second act. Anyway, I've gone on forever.
Progressive. It's a prog song.
It is a bit, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I love this record, and I actually had to look for it for a while because I wanted to buy it in a store and not online. And this is many years ago. So I think it's even before records were super easy to get online. So I was looking for the one that had "Oh Well," and I found it. One of my favorite tracks ever. "Oh Well." The riff, it's so heavy. It's like heavy blues. You say psychedelic. Well, yeah, maybe, but I think it's almost proto metal in one way.
Yeah.
Sort of. Yeah, it's so damn heavy, and it's nothing like Fleetwood Mac. I actually collected or tried to collect all the early Fleetwood Mac records up to Rumors, and then I stopped. I don't like the others. I think Rumors is a good record, and I think what they did afterwards, after the Peter Green left or got fired or whatever he was, that's great. I mean, those are fantastic records, but this is more interesting to me, at least, the old Fleetwood Mac.
I mean, it's a whole different sounding band, and to be clear, it sounds nothing like the band on Rumors for a bunch of different reasons, right? This is basically a bluesy guitar-based band at this point, right?
But it's funny that you say that because Fleetwood, what's their name? If Mick Fleetwood and
John McVie.
Yeah, and John McVie. Because when Peter Green jumped ship and then they continued on, didn't Lindsey Buckingham come in and take over a big part of both the sound and then the songwriting and stuff like that? So did they contribute much to the band?
Which is a theme we'll return to very shortly.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be great.
Okay, we're now going to just take a little pause and move over to the cheap heat section of this video. So
the cheap heat section, yes.
Cheap good records you can get for cheap.
In my opinion, I'm just gonna sail through these pretty quick. Do you know this record, Space, with Larry Coryell?
Record in my life. What is that?
This is a cheap heat record, in my opinion. This is 1974, I think. And you have the lineup is awesome. You have Larry Coryell and John McLaughlin on guitars.
Wow.
Korea on piano, Miroslav Vitos on bass, and Billy Cobham on drums. Oh, and it's the only time I think that you can hear Larry Coryell and John McLaughlin guitar battle with each other on electric guitar. This is a fantastic record that costs next to nothing. Highly recommended. Let's do a pop one. This is also one that I recommend this to everyone that is into music, period. Like Blood and Chocolate with Elvis Costello and the Attractions from 81, I think. 81 or 84. But my favorite Elvis Costello record, hands down. There's not a single bad track on this one. And I Want You, that track is probably on my best 25 songs ever recorded. It's a masterpiece. Unfortunately, I've never had a copy that sounds good. It's like these cheap 80s sort of thin vinyl
era for vinyl,
and overmastered and stuff like that. So, but yeah, cheap record to get. Jerry Goodman and John Hammer, Like Children. Do you know this one?
No, not that one. No, I don't.
It's back in the sort of early days of the VC. Derek Higgins showed this, and so this is like over 10 years ago. Derek Higgins showed this, and I actually got a copy in Malmö or something like that, south of Sweden. And once again, they just two guys here. Jerry Goodman played in the Flock. He's a violin player. Yeah, some more bands. And John Hammer, obviously, from different lineups and bands. They play all the instruments by themselves, and really, really good. And the cover artwork is awesome also.
Yeah.
Great record.
The cover art on that Spaces record was pretty cool too.
Yeah, it's really like almost psychedelic in a way. I think there's two different artworks on the Spaces record actually, but you know, do the Discog stance and check it out. And both of them is really cheap. This, on the other hand, I'm going to show you now. This is really cheap. I think like $8, $10 maybe, something like that. But if you want the original, you have to pay maybe, I don't know, $50, $60, something like that. And that's, I think in this case, no, it doesn't say anything. It just says Mike Oldfield, Sally Oldfield, and Pekka Pohjola. So this was released in 1977, I think, in Finland as a Pekka Pohjola record on Love Records. But Mike Oldfield played on it. And when he got famous in 1981, they reissued it as a Mike Oldfield record. So this isn't a Mike Oldfield record at all. This is a Pekka Pohjola record. But I mean, they had to make money, right? So they slabbed Mike Oldfield's name up in front.
It's usually more of a jazz stunt when records get reissued as somebody else totally different as the leader when they become more famous. Not that common in rock and roll.
No, and I mean, I don't know how popular or famous Pekka Pohjola was. I guess he's not that famous nowadays, but everyone knows about Mike Oldfield. So when they see this record, I guess that they try to pick it up, and it's an awesome record, really, really good. But it's a Pekka Pohjola record, and you have also Joey Wadenius, the Swedish guitar player on this one, plays his heart out on this. Pierre Molien from Gong, I think it's Gong, plays on it also. And then Lodek Gulgovsky, which is a keys player that went to Sweden to do some sessions with the Pop Workshop in sort of the obscure sort of fusion world. He's sort of a name. Highly, highly recommended. And the last one, and this is the best cheap heat record. You can buy this sealed for $1. Like, it's that cheap. And no one talks about it. And I think it's a masterpiece. Do you know about this one?
I do not know of that at all. Tell me about it.
He was a songwriter for Motown, I think, and Motown did a daughter label or whatever it's called Rare Earth.
Yeah.
So when they did that, they recorded sort of white soulful rock for a white audience instead of like black music for a black audience, and he got the opportunity to actually record a record instead of just writing the songs. So he did this. He had a small hit with Indiana Wants Me, but there is so many good tracks on this one. And first and foremost, you can get this for nothing. Like, they throw this at you in the store, and it
looks like the kind of record you can get for nothing. It's got that sort of tacky 70s art, right?
Yeah.
And typeface and all the rest of it.
It looks kind of very uninteresting. But he sings good. He's awesome. And songwriting perfect, but singing wise, he reminds me of sort of a little bit like a Lee Hazelwood kind of, maybe a little bit more light with a more soulful touch. But so yeah, that's my 5 cheap heats. Highly recommended, everyone.
Excellent. Okay, so now back to our regular scheduled programming. And so the next record we're going to talk about, I think you're going to talk about it, is
so the connection with the Fleetwood Mac record is close. Is that the word? Near, vital. Oh yeah, Buckingham and Nicks, 1973 on Polydor Records. This is, I think, a US first press.
Yeah, but is it a collector's item?
Oh, you have the collector's item.
But it's also got a punch hole, which means it didn't sell and was sent back to the company. So
should do it without the. This is awesome. Obviously, this is Buckingham and Nicks before they joined Fleetwood Mac in 1973. This was recorded at the famous, what's it called?
Sound City, isn't it?
Yeah, where Nevermind by Nirvana recorded in 1991. She was 25 when this was released, and he was 24, if I have done my research correct. And all of the songs are penned by these guys. I didn't recognize any of the background sort of musicians, but I don't think that matters really, because I think that these two artists is so damn talented that it wouldn't surprise me at all if they did most of the work on this one. There's not a bad song, in my opinion, on this one. And the talk on town, I guess, with this record is that it has never been officially reissued on any other format. It's not CD, not MP3, and I don't think that you can stream this. I might be mistaken. It's been a while since I looked this up, but if you want it, you have to buy the old vinyl copy. When we talk about official releases, there's a bunch of boots out there, but yeah. I think that was everything that I want to say about the record.
It's a fascinating record. The only name I was just checking, I think the only name of in terms of all the session people, the only person that I recognize is Jim Keltner, the drummer.
Oh yeah, obviously.
Up here and there, but otherwise you're right. It's all basically people you've never heard of. But what's striking, here's a record with Mick Fleetwood and John McVie on it, right? Here's a record that doesn't have them on it, right?
Yeah.
This one sounds like Fleetwood Mac of the late 70s. This one just does not at all. And in fact, I mean, this sounds like outtakes from their next record, the eponymous record, Fleetwood Mac, the first one, which has Landslide on it. And I think I mean, I'm sure this is one of the most written about and talked about bands in the world, but I'm not having done any of that research. My guess would be it's a combination of the incredible talent of these two young players, Buckingham and Nix, with the experience of McVie and Fleetwood being on well-produced hit records, right? Yep. And so somehow that just adds more polish to what was already clearly great raw material. It's just the songs, like the sound is great. The sound is just like that later 70s Fleetwood Mac sound, but the songwriting, it's like the dart doesn't quite hit the bullseye. It's just slightly to the right. It's like a 3.5 or a 4-star record, not a 5-star record, but there's not really a weak track here. It's very interesting. And there's some great guitar instrumentals, and Stevie Nicks' voice is fantastic. My only complaint is I wish she featured vocally a little bit more in this record than she does. Lindsey takes more, well, not more, but I would prefer to hear her more, but then that's just predilections. But yeah, great record, and buy it if you find it, because it's definitely a good one.
This is also one that I try out my stereo equipment with, because this is mastered by Robert Ludwig, 1973. So he did Led Zeppelin 2, and with all that sort of that history, putting up the bass too high. That was in 1969, I think. So this is just like 3 years later, and he didn't like master that much. If you're a mastering engineer, you do like 2 records a day, so each year has like this list of records that you master. But in the 60s it didn't do too much. Then in the 70s it really took off, and so I count this a little bit like the early Robert Ludwig. But
I should apologize too if you may be hearing, viewers may be hearing the sound of chickens in the background. That is in fact the sound of chickens in the background. So okay. I have no control over when chickens are going to make chickeny noises, so there we go. Okay, so our next record we're going to talk about is a change of pace. Is this record released on Impulse in, I think, 1968 or thereabouts, Cosmic Music, which is credited to John Coltrane and Alice Coltrane. It's a bit of an unusual record because it's cobbled together from 2 very different sources, one of which is, I guess, I mean, part of it is the history is important to know here. So Coltrane was rapidly developing in all kinds of directions, most of which were very unsettling and aversive to some of the critics and some of his audience in the latter part of 1965. That summer in 65, he and his quartet with Archie Shepp in tow go and play Chicago at a big jazz festival put on by Downbeat, and they basically create a big walkout because people can't stand where the direction the music is going. It's little wild free jazz and lengthy solos, and they actually had to cut the band off. I mean, Coltrane gets shut off like 20 minutes into his set because people were leaving the festival, which is kind of wild. Then later in that year, he's added another drummer, right? So Elvin Jones is still in the band, and then he adds Rashid Ali, and this kind of, as you can understand, gets on Elvin Jones's nerves. And so by early 66, Elvin Jones, I think the quote was, "All I could hear was noise," and he leaves the band. And so there's 4 tracks on here. 2 of the tracks are made days after Elvin Jones has left the band. They're out in San Francisco playing some dates. He walks out, says, "I can't take this. I'm going to go." And he goes to join Duke Ellington to talk about going from like a wild ass experimental free jazz situation to about the most traditional setting he could have found. I guess it was therapy for him or something.
Maybe. Yes.
And so you've got Rashid Ali and the percussionist Ray Appleton, who are just raising hell. The first track on each side is a track from that version of the Coltrane group, kind of a quintet at that point with an extra percussionist. So Alice is on those tracks, but does not feature heavily. But the other 2 tracks are after John Coltrane has died, and they're recorded in 1968 by Alice and a small group at their home studio in their home in Dix Hills, New York. And those are very distinct. So you've got 2 long, pretty far out tracks, of which the first one that are Coltrane tracks, Manifestation, is just wild all the way through. On the other one, which is called Reverend King, has a very beautiful beginning and a very beautiful end. And the 10 minutes in between the beautiful beginning and the beautiful end is 10 minutes of apocalyptic sax playing from Coltrane and from Pharoah Sanders. But the 2 Alice Coltrane tracks, for me, are the reason to get this record, because they are beautiful. They are highly reminiscent of some of the work that she was doing, like in the early part of her Impulse career, like Huntington Ashram Monastery and Patali El Daoud, like tracks off of there. Her playing on this record, on the tracks that she leads, the 2 tracks, is just like that. And it reminds you of how blues, like she's known for her harp and her organ playing, but when she plays piano, she is the master. She is a beast playing the blues. And that's what she is doing here. So it's a bit of a hodgepodge. It's a strange record. You're about 65-70% of it is full on late Coltrane, wild ass free jazz, and then 2 very cool Alice Coltrane tracks that I think are the reason to get the record. Anyway, what's your impression?
Yeah, but I read my notes here, and I wrote that when I listened to it now again, it's I think pretty obvious that this is a Alice Coltrane record, really. And if you're venturing into Coltrane or John Coltrane territory, I don't think that this is the first one you should get. Then again, I think that Rashid Ali, Pharoah Sanders playing on this is from another world. I love his playing. This is really on fire. It's almost like he tries to prove himself worthy in some ways. So yeah, I'm super glad that I got it before it really skyrocketed in price. And I wish I had a first press of this, but
so it's an interesting history in this one. I think we both have the Impulse release of it, I think.
Yeah, I have the MCA version.
I don't know I'm not sure which one I have, actually. That's a good question. I forgot to make a note. Oh, I've got like a 72.
Oh, nice.
But so Coltrane dies summer of 67, and Alice then creates her own, maybe John had created, I can't remember, but anyway, they have their own record label in theory called Coltrane Records, and she releases this record initially on Coltrane Records with a different cover. And the people at Impulse, like Bob Thiel and others, realize, hold on, because they had the rights to anything Coltrane recorded while he was alive because he was under exclusive contract. So she puts out a record which is 70% music, which they had rights to. So, but they were very decent about it. They called her up and they said, look, this is a great, they didn't say, you're in breach of contract. They said, this is a great record. but it hasn't sold very much and you haven't packaged it very well. Would you like it if we released it with beautiful new packaging and used our distribution network to send it out? And by the way, we'd like to sign you as an impulse artist.
Yeah.
And so that was their pitch. And so she goes, sure, that's great. So I mean, her account of all that. So it was like the least conflictual copyright dispute in the history of jazz. So there are early versions of this that are actually on her imprint, Coltrane Records, which is why you see this little thing right down at the bottom there. So that's the produced by Coltrane Records. That's the tag there. So anyway, interesting, I thought. But
I have a talking about vinyl. I don't know what this is. If anyone watching knows anything about this, just give me a comment or something. But it's not a promo. I don't think so. But it's a gold stamp. It says export only for sale outside continental United States only, and then Sweden. But I can't find any sort of information on a, Swedish press or a Swedish import press or something like that. So if anyone knows,
it's a rights issue. It's like trying to watch Premier League football in some different country. It's the same kind of a thing, who carries it, whatever, I would think. But yeah,
maybe, yeah. It's a cool record.
Very cool, but very, as you say, not the place to start.
No, not the place to start. Yeah, it's my turn, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, I thought when we discussed which records that we wanted to talk about, this was, I think, the first one that came to mind, because if I don't know if you watched it, Allan, but Stranger Things on Netflix. So Kate Bush has had a huge upswing in sales through that series because they played Running Up That Hill. And so that, and yeah, oh nice, you had the other.
I have the alternate cover. Yeah,
I had both, but I sold that one. I don't know which side.
I think you've got the more legit version of it. This is some bogus, I don't know, Canadian or American version, but what you've got is the legit cover, I think. So
yeah, I think that this is the sort of the first one or something like that. But I like that version also. It looks almost like a bootleg or something like that. This is her debut record, and I don't know how old she was. Like
not old, 18? Like 18 or 19, something like that.
Something like that. And she wrote all, if not most, if not all the songs on this one. And it's very cinematic in its approach, I think. And it's very dramatic also. So it's almost, I got almost the sort of same feeling when I listen to Paul McCartney songs from the Beatles era, like Hey Jude and stuff like that. He and she when people in that age writes these songs, there's no way that they can have experienced this because they're not that old, they have so much more to experience, and then again they write these fantastic songs. So and it's so cool. The kicking side, yeah, I don't know. The story goes that David Gilmour. Yeah, David Gilmour. Yeah, sort of discovered her and let her record a demo or something like that, and that eventually went on to be parts of this. Like Man with the Child in His Eyes was, I think, the first one that she recorded on that demo, and then re-recorded it on this one. But Wuthering Heights is maybe the most known track from this one,
well, which is Man with the Child in His Eyes is my absolute favorite track off this record.
I love that track too, but Wuthering Heights, it's a little bit, but maybe it has to do with sort of emotions, and when you I mean, I have some connections with that song, through life and stuff like that, and it influences a little bit what you think of the songs, I guess. But yeah, a fantastic record, probably one of the best debut records ever recorded. What do you think?
I mean, I agree with you, and there's a lot of irony in this record, because apparently she hadn't actually read Wuthering Heights when she wrote the song.
Yeah, exactly.
So she knew the characters, but maybe she'd seen a TV adaptation or something.
Yeah, I think so.
But it's a very Bronte. This will sound super pretentious, but it's a very Bronte sisters-esque kind of effort, because as you say, it's written by someone who, was an innocent, was a very young person at the time. But there are all these songs about love and sex, basically using, from the female gaze, very distinct from a lot of music, obviously at the time, because rock and roll is so dominated by male voices and male writing and so on. But it's got every rock and roll theme going in this whole record. I think there's, in addition to the two songs we talked about, there are 5 or 6 really great tracks. I think not everything hits, but as a debut record, like, the songwriting is just incredible, and it just seems to get better and better with the passing of time. And I'm not surprised, that this happy coincidence has happened with this TV show. Incidentally, well, I don't have a link to the show, but a very good friend of mine from university days, his son is the star of Stranger Things.
No way.
Yeah, Finn Wolfhard.
Okay.
So I knew Finn when he was a little boy. I haven't seen him for many years, but I knew him when he was a little boy. And then, so that's, anyway, we have there's a Vancouver Hollywood connection on the West Coast. So there are a lot of people in this part of the world have Hollywood connections, strangely enough.
Okay.
Anyway, well, not a lot. I don't, but some people do.
Not yet.
Yeah. Anyway, that was a great pick, and thank you for picking that one. It's such a great record. So
yeah, great record.
All right, my turn.
It's your turn to show the sheep heat.
Okay, so here's what I got. Now you did a great job of picking some really awesome and super obscure records that nobody will have heard of. I've gone a little more commercial here. I'm thinking, if I'm somebody watching this and I'm trying to build up my record collection, and what's always good if you're ordering stuff off Discogs is to find a place where you can get more than one record, because then you're doubling up on the shipping. So I picked records that are kind of, I would consider to be core records, well, most of them anyway, to have in your collection, but which are really good records, which somehow strangely are just not very expensive at all. And so these are records which you can get for less than $10, where there are many, many copies that were very good plus or better, and in most cases for really early or original pressings, right? So here's one. Grover Washington Jr., Mr. Magic. This the title track is probably his most famous track, but this is probably the best record put out on Creed Taylor's Kudu Records. Comes out in 74, 75, something like that. It's got the usual sort of Creed Taylor magic and the fantastic lineup of house musicians there. And this you can get for nothing. Still, it's also got this incredible cover art as well, glossy cover, and it sounds amazing. And it's got the title track with a great riff by Eric Gale on guitar. Anyway, so this one is an absolute banger, which you can pick up for nothing. Next one, don't normally deal much in compilations, but every now and then there's a compilation which is just a classic compilation, like the Eagles' greatest hits, everybody has, which is popular for a reason, because it's a well-compiled piece. It doesn't really miss a lot of stuff out. This one is one that a lot of people of my generation grew up on. It was the first Who record that most people that I knew had, and it basically compiles all of their singles from their big singles from the 1960s. So this is them up to, but not including Tommy and Who's Next, right? So it's got, whatever, I Can't Explain, I Can See for Miles, My Generation, like all their great Pinball Wizard, so it must include Tommy, up to the time of Tommy, yeah, because Pinball Wizard's on here as well. You can get this for nothing, including first pressings, mono pressings, you can get for nothing. And if you start anywhere with a Who, I would say this compilation is the place to start, and then you can build up from there, because it's superb.
Side note, I actually got that just this week. First Tracks pressing, UK press, and the first one I think doesn't have the title on it, or maybe just up in the right corner, something like that. I've
got a Super Saver.
Superstars
at super savings, specially priced. So there, like I say, you can get this for cheap, right?
Even then.
How does yours sound? Have you played it yet?
No, I haven't played it yet. So I haven't cleaned it. So I have to clean it. Those Tracks records, I have like the Jimi Hendrix Access Bolas Love, I think, on Tracks. And I think that the pressings that I've heard is you really need to give them a good clean.
Sure.
So yeah.
Okay, next one. Cannonball Adderley, country preacher. Cannonball Adderley got heavily into civil rights, and he had a tremendous band with his brother Nat in the early 70s. This one, I think Reverend Jesse Jackson is here. Yeah, actually, you can see there he is there.
Okay.
Yeah, so he does some of the announcements on this record, and it's live. Yeah, you can see like here, like there's pictures of anyway, you can anyway, he does the announcements. It's live at a club, I think, in LA. There's a lot of really good, very funky, very soul jazzy Cannonball Adderley records from the early 70s. This is probably the pick of the bunch, but there are a bunch of other ones that are really good as well. This one, okay, I don't know why this is so cheap. This is Rod Stewart's second best record ever, after Every Picture Tells a Story, which I think most people would say is undeniably his best. This is a first pressing. It's a very interesting, if you look at here, like this opens up to a gatefold, but also on the back, this opens up to be a, whoops, hang on, a gatefold shows you the whole band sitting in the so it's a very, and then the so basically that's what that's the whole thing. So cool. It's a very cool issue. I think this is a first pressing, and this has got, I mean, some of his greatest ever songs on. Like, it's got his version of Jimi Hendrix's Angel. If you've heard that, it's phenomenal. Italian Girls, True Blue, You Wear It Well. This is arguably as strong, or just about as strong, as Every Picture Tells a Story. You get there for $5. Like first pressings in good condition. I don't understand it, but I would say carpe diem if you like Rod Stewart at all. And then finally, I just reviewed this record actually just a few days ago. Yeah, but it's super cheap. This is Sergio Mendes's one album deviation into rootsy Brazilian music. After doing 6 years of schlocky pop bossa nova, he then makes this incredible record, which is so I mean, it's so rhythmic. Right, it's traditional Brazilian rhythms. There's no bossa nova on here at all. It's jazz influenced, and it's got some incredible guitar playing by a guy called Oscar Neves, who also had made his name in bossa nova, but they're not playing bossa nova here. Just an absolute. This is his. He called his first group Brazil 66, and they started in 1966, and then they quickly became outdated sounding, because by the time it was 1970, having a group called Brazil 66 was kind of dated. So this is now 1972, and he's called his group, as you can see, Brazil 77. So he's given himself 5 years before he was out of date.
Yeah, right? Perfect.
Anyway, and somewhere in here, I think this is I think it's Herb Alpert's wife, who of course was a label boss. I think that's Lanny Hall. I'm not 100% certain. That might be here as well. Anyway, I have to check. Anyway, great record. $5, maybe $10, and also a very strange. I've never seen anything like this in my life. So yeah, it's open at both. It's open at both ends.
Never seen that.
Yeah, which is kind of weird. Have you seen that before?
No, I've never seen that. I've seen, I mean, top going from the top, like Russian and Asian pressings and stuff like that, with very, very flimsy covers, but never seen that. Great picks.
Thank you.
That's fun.
A little more commercial. Okay, next record. I suspect this may be controversial. So I just picked up the Speaker's Corner pressing of this famous record, probably Charles Lloyd's best, well, at least largely acknowledged as his best record, and which was a live performance at Monterey with his mid-60s quartet, which is an incredible group. And so Lloyd, of course, had made his name with Chico Hamilton back in the day out on the West Coast. So he's a product of the whole West Coast scene. His piano player here is a young Keith Jarrett, who, as we know, would go on to be arguably the greatest jazz performer of the 1970s, or certainly right up there. Cecil McBee, also a phenomenal bass player. And he's very young here. These guys must be 19 or 20, something like that. I don't know what they are. And Jack DeJohnette on drums. And this is a record which covers almost every single style of jazz that then existed. You have the title track, which is the whole first side. And this, to me, is kind of like the prototype for all those sort of big sort of sidelong spiritual jazz workouts that people like Pharoah and Alice Coltrane would do in the years to come. This is a kind of the prototype for that. It sort of ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's very pastoral, sometimes it's super dynamic. But then you've got like, you know, these hard swinging tunes like Sorcery. You've got Lloyd sounding like, I like on that song by McBee, Song of Her. To me, he sounds like Coltrane on ballads. It's just the same tone, the same feel. There's like a bebopish tune, East of the Sun. We've got a little bit of everything, and the virtuosity of the players is incredible. So I think this is tremendous, but I'd be interested to hear what you think.
Yeah, I also think that it's really, really good. It's a good record, but when I got this, I held it so high, and I really, really loved it. But revisiting it now this week, I wasn't that impressed. And actually, I wasn't. The thing that I was least impressed with was Charles Lloyd's playing, because the other guys, I think, does a fantastic job. But his sort of phrasing on saxophone is with his bursts that don't go anywhere. I think I have a small problem with that, and I think that when he goes over to the flute, I get almost like a Jethro Tull sort of vibe to it, which is great, but doesn't really work in this setting. But I think that the second side, in my opinion, is more interesting, especially with Sorcery by Keith Jarrett. That song I thought was really, really good and worked all the way. But we're still talking about a fantastic record. It's just like, if I thought that this was a 10 before, because I haven't listened to this in a couple of years, maybe it was a 7 now when I listen to it.
Yeah, so it's all these things are a matter of taste. Well, I think what's really interesting about these songs, what that you mentioned, the one by Jarrett and then the one by McBee, is that the songwriters don't actually feature very much on those tracks. Like you know, when I first time I heard the Jarrett song, I'm like, okay, this will be like a Keith Jarrett workout. No, I don't think he even soloed on that track, right? And on McBee's the song that McBee writes, he's playing the sort of bass ostinato, which is quite prominent. But again, you don't get a big long bassy workout. These are mainly vehicles for their band leader, which is kind of unusual, actually. It's not usually the way it goes. But yeah, no, I hear what you're saying about the personally, I think I really dig the flute stuff. I think it made me think when I was listening to it again, hey, I should do a video on just like jazz flute, because there's a bunch of, it's like Frank West, Herbie Mann, Harold Lloyd, Eric Dolphy, right? You know, Pharoah Sanders. There's a lot of, you know, really interesting and very different flute players. It's like Yusuf Lateef too, for that matter, right? So you get a whole huge but I wasn't getting the Jethro Tull vibe. But now that you mentioned that in my mind,
that's probably just me.
I think you just dragged me down now. I think that's or up.
No, but still highly recommended. I mean, and I bet that Speaker's Corner version of it sounds great, doesn't it?
Very nice. Very. It's very silent.
Yeah, cool. And this is also I don't think that I paid very much for this. This is the first US press with that sort of old Atlantic label in like mint condition, and I think I paid maybe $10, but this is many years ago.
I paid more than that for the Speaker's Corner.
Yeah, I give a bit. I mean, and that's another like side discussion. But these audiophile pressings, the costs of them, it's ridiculous. Like, really.
Well, and then the whole MoFi scandal this week too, right?
Yeah, I didn't mention it, but yeah, I've been watching that intensely. Like, I try to watch every single video, and there's a lot about this because I want as many opinions as possible. I don't know what I think because I'm not a MoFi collector.
Yeah, I don't have any. So personally,
no,
I'm just watching this. It's like watching a car accident. You know, I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
can't really take your eyes off it. But shit, it's stirring up some emotions.
Well, the trouble is, you know, a lot of people have, you know, audiophile discussions rely on very fine grained differences that sometimes only dogs can hear, right?
Yep,
And
definitely.
some people have probably nailed their colors to the mast on certain things, and they're now feeling that they've been made to look a little bit foolish, because it was a CD rip or something, which is why I don't trust myself to make audiophile judgments, and I never really do. I just know if I like how it sounds or not. But
No, yeah, very few times I've been able to compare the different pressings and audiophile pressings. This that I'm going to show you next is and the final record is one of them, where I really hear the difference, definitely. But when it comes to MoFi's one step, I mean, 120 for us Europeans, it's about 200 with shipping, 220 maybe even dollars for one record, and it's in a box, but I mean, it's still just one record that you get. And sure thing, if it comes from a digital file, I would be kind of bummed out if I pay that for one record. And then people out there has 11, 15 of them. So yeah. But this is, let me see here. I'm just going to check my notes here for this one.
I'll just say, while you're doing that, I'll just say all the more reason to go for early pressings. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, the more I collect records, the more that's where I gravitate, and the more I am willing to spend more money for early pressings, than these more elaborate recent experiments. Unless I'm pretty confident in the product, like I am with some of the recent Impulse reissues. Sure. Like my version of Ballads that I just got is amazing.
So. Yeah, and the Blue Note also, the classic series and Tone Poets. I don't have many Tone Poets, but I've tried to buy as many classics as I can afford, or that I don't have already in my collection. And then there's some that I just don't think are that good. So I'm not spending money on stuff that I don't think is good. But they sound terrific, and I don't feel the need of looking for a first press. Now, I stumbled upon a first stereo press of Signwinder with Lee Morgan when I had the classic series, and obviously I'm keeping the first press. It doesn't sound as good than the classic series. The classic series sounds better. 80s series, classic series, and Tone Poets. And that sounds better than the original, definitely. I mean, there's no doubt. But when it comes to record collecting, I go with my gut. I like to listen with my gut. If I feel the record, if it has age, if it has some ticks and pops, it doesn't matter, because it's a tactile medium for me. But talking about audiophile pressings, so the last one of the ordinary sort of standard records that we are going to talk about is Something Else with Cannonball Adderley. And I actually have this in Music Matters pressing.
Oh yeah.
One of those sort of dirt expensive reissues, that in 33 RPM in this case, that I got as a gift from one of the VC members, Paul Baraka P Dub. So very nice of him. I wouldn't buy it otherwise. I wouldn't pay for it, but it sounds terrific, like really, really great. So 1958, this is the year before Kind of Blue, just to anchor this somewhere. You have Miles Davis, Hank Jones, Sam Jones, and Art Blakey on this, along with obviously Cannonball Adderley also. One of few pieces, you have to correct me here, Allan, because I think that you know more about this than me, but one of few cases where Miles Davis is a sideman on a record.
You're absolutely right. That's one of the really interesting things about this record.
Yeah.
Although is he the sideman on this record? What do you think about it?
Pretty nice. I haven't really thought about that. No, I think that I'm with Cannonball on this one, but Miles has wrote the title track on it, so it's pretty obvious that he is sort of dictating the sort of the record or the sessions.
Well, if you look at it, right, Miles plays several of the first solos, which in that era was a this the leader played the first solo very often. And Miles always did on his records, right? He composed the title track, right?
Yeah.
Chose most of the material, right? So yes, it says Cannonball, but whose record is this? right?
Yeah, that's a good
I think
point.
this,
I haven't thought about that.
and basically Cannonball was playing in Miles's group. He
Yes,
was Miles's
yes,
sideman. So I think, I mean,
good point, yeah.
can be forgiven for, you know, saying, okay, Miles, you basically lead the session. I mean, if I'm in a jazz session with Miles Davis, am I going to say, no, Miles, this is how you
Yeah.
do it, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Obviously, yeah. But it's weird in that case that Miles didn't, I mean, force it to be a Miles kind of record, because when you see the '60s, right, he writes some of the songs that he plays in the '50s, but in the '60s, there's a lot of other guys playing or writing the material that he has on his records. So I don't know if Miles is going to go down in history as the sort of best composer, or not best maybe, but most sort of, yeah, but let's say best composer of music. The '60s, he played, and doing the connection with Forest Flower, he played a lot of like Wayne Shorter's songs when he was entering the band.
He relied on a lot on Wayne Shorter in that quintet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a 10 out of 10 record in my opinion. There's not a bad song. There's not a bad moment, and it's also an important record because this is up there with Kind of Blue, but earlier than that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, essential jazz record in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree, and it's interesting. You know, why is, I mean, I guess partly Cannonball is a leader because was this his first record for Blue Note, Cannonball? Because he done his debut was for MRC Records.
Yeah.
But I had to go back and check this. But he was, at the time, Cannonball was kind of headline news, right? Because he'd come to New York in the mid '50s, and it was sort of an overnight sensation. And I'm not saying he was a bigger name than Davis, but clearly Blue Note felt like it was worth, you know, having him and not Davis as leader, because ultimately this comes down to, well, what's going to sell more records? Yeah, I mean, this is a record that is right up there, you know, with Kind of Blue and Mingus and all those great late '50s records. It's not like as revolutionary record as some of those, right? It's pretty much straight ahead, hard bop, lots of blues and so on. And even if you haven't, even if you don't think you've heard this record, you probably have heard,
Definitely.
you know, some of the heads and the arrangements and so on. So yeah, I mean, as you say, an essential record has got to be part of your jazz collection.
And Art Blakey Art Blakey's playing on this, I think, is really good. It doesn't remind me of Art Blakey's playing otherwise, but I think that if you listen to it, it's
I love Art Blakey as a sideman better than I like him as a leader. I find when he's a leader, it's too bombastic. Not always, but sometimes. But as a sideman, I think there was probably no better hard bop drummer, right? So
no problem.
I point out my pressing is a Japanese pressing, which has the seal of approval. I can't read Japanese, so I don't know who provided the seal of approval. But yeah, this one sounds, it's one of the, there were a lot of Japanese presses of Blue Notes in the early '70s, and I think this is from like '72 or '73. Anyway,
they did a fantastic job. The few of those Japanese presses I've heard sounds terrific. So I haven't seen a VC video about Japanese pressings because it feels like all Japanese pressing sounds good, but that's not the case. I mean, not everything can't sound good coming just because it comes from Japan. But I guess that the methods that they had was like successful when pressing vinyl. It would be nice to have some sort of history of the sort of the Japanese pressed Western records.
Are you issuing a challenge?
yeah. This is a challenge to all you listening.
That would be cool. I mean, the knock on, if you surf the Steve Hoffman, you know, music forums, which are usually good places to go, you know, to find any debate about certain things, right? What I've learned from those conversations is a number of people, not everybody, but a percentage of people find there's dog deciding to move. There, nope, There's Max. He's actually just visiting. Anyway, he's heard enough. The knock on Japanese pressings is that they may lack a little bottom end, right?
Okay.
Sometimes I personally have not really found that, or it's not something that I can't fix with just by tweaking my bass dial a little bit. But what I will say is routinely the vinyl is whisper quiet, like just the quietest vinyl you've ever heard, just as a rule, not because you spent some huge amount of money on some speaker's corner thingy or whatever, but just as a rule, it's going to be really quiet and high quality. You're not going to have warps. And then secondly, the resale market from Japan may look expensive when you look at it, but typically speaking, the Japanese resellers will undergrade and undervalue their records. They'll tell you it's very good. North American reseller would sell that record as very good plus, or near mint, right? Japanese seller will sell it as very good, and you put this like, what is wrong with this record? Nothing, and it's immaculate. It looks like it's never been played. Be handled with white gloves and some hermetically sealed environment. I mean, there's so much care. So, I mean, this is something which Japanese society is so great about. So much care is into the quality control of the things which are made, and then so much care taken in archiving and storing things, right? It is almost never a bad idea. Or at least you may pay a little bit more, but you're going to get value for money beyond what you think. That's my experience anyway. I don't know about
you. I think you're spot on. So I agree. With the few times I've bought Japanese pressings or stumbled upon them.
Yeah, I was building my jazz collection. I did it. Okay, so now we're doing our surprise records. So here's my surprise record. Do you have this one?
Nope.
Okay.
I don't think I have any Clifford Brown records. I don't think so.
Well, you need to fix that. You need to fix that because he is fantastic.
Yeah.
So of course, for those of you who are not big Clifford Brown aficionados, Clifford Brown tragically short-lived, died in a car accident in '56. But in the 3 or 4 years prior to that, when he was with Max Roach in a quartet or quintet, can't remember, but Harold Land also. So it was Clifford Brown on trumpet, Max Roach on drums, Harold Land on saxophone. Phenomenal group. And like Study and Brown and the Clifford Brown, Max Roach quartet, quintet, I can't remember. Anyway, those records from the mid '50s are great. This is recorded. It was originally on Pacific Jazz, but this is a Fontana European release. And this comes out. This is released. This is a '65 pressing, but the actual original name of this record is Clifford Brown Jazz Immortal. And it came out on Pacific Jazz Records in 1960. So it was a Dick Bach production, right? The main guy at Pacific Jazz. I have rarely heard a record that sounds this good, like coming through the speakers. I mean, first of all, those old Pacific Jazz and contemporary records were so incredibly well engineered, and I'm on a big jag of picking those up now because I'm just absolutely in love with the sound, like especially contemporary Roy Dunan, one of the greatest engineers in the history of music. But this one is just incredibly good sounding, well recorded music. And on top of this, Brown is just at the absolute peak of his power. This is while he's with Max Roach, but it's a session with a session date with a bunch of other people. So on here, Zoot Sims is on tenor sax. Bob Gordon, a lesser known name, but he was a West Coast regular on baritone. Guy called Stu Williamson, who I don't know very much, on the valve trombone, which is a funny instrument, not the slide, but it just has the valves like a trumpet trombone. Russ Freeman, again, another West Coast sort of regular guy, but not that well known outside of that environment, on piano. Carson Smith or Joe Mondragon on bass, and Shelly Mann on drums. And it's a very analogous record to Sonny Rollins and the Contemporary Leaders, which is another fantastic record that I just got a first pressing of the other day. Nice. Because we have an East Coast virtuoso in the form of Clifford Brown or Sonny Rollins, in the case of the other record, out in California recording for one of the local labels with a bunch of local West Coast session guys. And it is just incredible. And I highly recommend the Fontana reissue, European reissue, which you probably find easier to find. is well worth picking up. And I'd be very interested to know if anybody watching this has got the Jazz Immortal first press on Pacific Jazz, how that sounds, because this is instantly became one of my top 20 favorite records in my collection.
Ah, cool.
It just sounds so great. Anyway, Warm, otherwise known as Jazz Immortal. There we go. And
cool.
how about you?
Yeah, my surprise is one that I picked up in Gothenburg now. Copenhagen. When we were there, I had the pleasure of going to a store. We went with family, so I had limited of time. And I've been to Copenhagen so many times, the capital of Denmark, so many times without knowing about this. And I talked with the store owner, and he said that he has been there for 12 years. This is a jazz bar with live events, but it's also doubling as a jazz record store. So it's called like Jazz and Coffee or something like that. But you can drink a beer and flipping through records. It's like dying and going to heaven. And the guy is maybe in his, I don't know, mid 60s, something like that. Super knowledgeable, very nice. And I flipped through the records. I found this one, and I knew that it was good. I haven't heard it, but I read about it, and I got it right away. This is Bill Frisell's Nashville. Came out in 1997. Right. From the beginning, but only on CD. And then it was released on Nonsuch in 2018, limited to 3,000 copies. And this is also an audiophile sort of record. It's so well recorded. It's almost scary. And I have heard my fair share of Bill Frisell records, but he has never played like this, like he does on this one. It's recorded in Nashville. It's called Nashville, and it has that sort of Nashville style to it. I think that most of the personnel on this is Nashville players also. So I mean, this is as far as you can go from the Jon Zorn material.
Yeah, no, I don't know Bill Frisell very well. What is his main claim to fame?
Main claim to fame is, I think, playing the guitar with Jon Zorn in, I guess the East Coast of the States. Playing free jazz, really, like really avant-garde free jazz guitar, and this is everything but that. Really, this is him playing beautiful guitar, and such a well recorded. So check it out.
So it's like a journey down the roots road for him, is it? Or
yeah, I think so. But then again, he releases like 3 records every year. So he has a vast sort of back catalog. If you want to go back, he's done one that came out maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, something like that. That was pretty well received by critics at the time, where he does like film and TV series scores just on solo guitar. So I think that he's a little bit of everywhere, but he has his base, or at least he's started his career in free jazz. And because it's limited, I think I bought this for like $35, something like that. It's a double LP, but it's only 3,000 copies and came out in 2018. I think this is still available to get, but when it's gone, I predict that this is going to be one of those records that you have to pay shitload of money to get, because this is going into the history books. So that's my recommendation and my surprise.
There we go. And I wouldn't be surprised if it did amplify in value. I mean, the vinyl market right now is nuts. Like I have like my kids gave me a copy of, the band Greta Van Fleet.
Yep.
Anyway, so I got a copy of they've got a 4-song EP, I think, of Black Smoke Rising.
Okay.
It was everywhere in record stores. Anyway, I just looked the other day, and it's now on Discogs. It's selling for like $150 a crack. This EP from like 3 or 4 years ago, of which there were many copies made. I do not understand this, and it's good music. Don't get me wrong, but I there's some other weird force at play here. I'm not quite sure what it is. I think I blame Albania, but
maybe I don't know.
I'll have to figure it
Yeah,
out.
I agree with you totally, and it's I don't know if it's just me just right now where I'm in that life, but I'm getting a little bit bummed out. I'm really glad that I have the collection that I have,
Mhm.
because getting records nowadays, it's a hassle really.
Yes. You gotta have a strategy, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And we talked a little bit before we hit record, and I ventured into CDs, which I thought I would never in my life do, because I didn't even own a CD player. Now I own a fantastic $2,000 CD player that sounds just as good as, not as good as, but almost as good as my records now.
I think
So
there's a certain era of music is unavoidable. If you want to collect that era of music, you kind of need a CD player for that. For anything
yeah,
from
yeah,
sort of
definitely.
1995 to 2005, right, or 1990 even to
Yeah.
2005. It's tough. And even then, so a lot of the vinyl that you can get from then is after the fact vinyl, ripped from the digital source, and so on. So what's the point of why not just get the CD,
Yeah,
right?
and it's I mean that's another discussion. I love the sort of to put the to put down the LP and enjoying the entire side. It's a investment of time that you do, and you get something in return. So even if the sound nowadays to me will be the same, I still prefer the vinyl. But it's just as you say, I bought this stack of ECM records from early 2000s the other
Wow.
day, and I think I paid $3 or $4 each for these. They sound terrific. None of them has been released on vinyl, so
Yeah.
it's the way to go. I mean, yeah. But my heart is still in vinyl,
Yeah,
obviously.
I know. I hear you. So there you are. Episode 5 is in the can. Another fantastic journey through the quirky world of our own personal tastes. And thanks also, Jonas, for your great suggestions on the cheap heats.
Yeah.
Get in
Thank you.
there, and we'll see you all again for episode 6 coming to a YouTube channel near you very shortly.
Yeah, definitely.
Ciao.
Bye.